Hello everyone and welcome to this video on introduction to management models. The aim of this video is to establish why management models are important, the impact of management models, as well as give an overview of the four major approaches to developing management models themselves. So if we start with the question of why management models are important, well, there are quite a few distinct reasons. So one thing which is really important for us to realize is that theory, practice, and behavior are really interrelated. So theory and the development of theory really does influence behavior within organizations. It has an impact on management practice, and this is a multi-directional relationship. So management practice then influences behavior, obviously, and theory derived from research situated within actual organizations, and actual practice is influenced in turn. So management models are not abstract, they're not separate from practice. We shouldn't consider management models as a type of academic theory which is divorced from real world practice of management, but rather as something that exists in symbiosis with management practice itself. So as we track the development of different management models, we're also really tracking the evolution and development of different theories and different realities of management practice. We're also seeing management models being derived from research which is placed within actual practice. So research which births then new management models really also allows us to track the history of behavior within organizations and the history of management approaches. So it is an important tool to understand the past and present of practice within business, and also to see emerging trends that point towards the future of management practice. The second reason why we really do want to have a focus on management models is that by examining the development of management thinking and the state of management theory and management models, really helps us isolate some important core principles that underlie the actual process of management itself. So it helps us think systematically about what management involves, helps us understand what some of the important environmental factors and circumstances surrounding particular approaches to management are, and really think clearly and systematically about breaking this mass of practice, this thing that we call management, down into its constituent parts. So a really important first step in doing this is by examining it in isolation. So by developing management models, we are really trying to crystallize our understanding of these important key principles that underlie management itself. The third reason why we're going to consider management models at some length over the next few weeks is really that management theory itself is an evolution. It's an evolving body of theory, and it evolves in line with changes both in the organizational environment as well as the micro and macro environment. So we need to understand that management theory it doesn't exist in the abstract. It exists within a particular context, within a particular environment. So by understanding where management models may be appropriate, where different management models may be effective, we can understand this not just by looking at the particular models, but by also looking at research, which environments and which contexts different models tend to produce positive results. That really helps us understand how management models are implemented and what circumstances, environments, and contexts they're implemented within. So with those reasons for why we're going to spend a bit of time, both in this session and obviously in following sessions on management models, we're going to turn our attention to major approaches to management. And I do want to clarify here that we are talking about broad approaches. Each approach contains multiple different models, and you'll find some models which fall outside of these four approaches, or straddle one or more, two or more approaches themselves. So these are just broad general approaches, but we can identify four major ones that have had a large impact on management as a field. So we have classical approaches to management, human relations approaches to management, systems approaches, and contingency approaches to management. If we start first with classical approaches to management, we can see here that classical approaches traditionally within management have really focused on the overarching purpose of management, looking at how management imposes structure within organizations in the form of hierarchical structure, as well as functional and divisional structures, and is aimed at trying to identify the optimal way of operating. One of the models that's most closely associated with the classical approach is scientific management, based on the works of Frederick Taylor, which heavily relied upon the notion of there being a single best way to carry out any given individual task. And the role of management was to identify what this best way of carrying out the task is. Frederick Taylor heavily relied upon things like time and motion studies to find the most productive means of executing a single task. And then once that's been identified, management would then impose a system to ensure that the organization follows this one best way of doing something, using things such as pay incentives, as well as the threat of being fired or fined or sacked. So it is a very top-down approach to management generally. It also very much does focus upon formal systems. So whether they're formal contractual agreements, as in the case of pay incentives, or formal lines of communication, it is a formalized system of management. This does stand in contrast with the human relations approach to management, and this can find its roots in things such as the Hawthorne experiments and other human relations models, which really do focus not on just formal structures but also informal structures within the organization. So peer-to-peer groups, social interactions, relationships that go outside of just the formal relationship specified by job title, broadly looking at social factors within the workplace. So management here is not just seen as the formalized system of issuing commands, going through a hierarchical system of establishing incentives and disincentives, but also as the collection of individuals within a workplace, with all of the social interactions, social relationships, and what we would sometimes term soft interactions that occur between any two people within an organization, or at work. As a consequence, human relations approaches to management don't just focus then on the formal tools available within a hierarchical workplace, but also focus on the broader set of tools available to managers. This would include things like workplace culture, the establishment of culture, the establishment of norms of behavior, which are expected behavioral patterns that are not set by formal rules, and other tools within the toolkit to get behavior and practice within an organization to maximize efficiency without simply resorting to just the formal structures and formal incentives and disincentives present in the classical approach. Our third approach to management would be the systems approach, and this is an interesting approach. So this in some ways attempts to integrate and combine the strengths of both classical and human relations approaches, attempts to both leverage the formal structures and hierarchical arrangements of the classical approach, along with the informal and social focus of the human relations approach, and it does this through viewing the organization as a dynamic whole which consists of an interrelated set of parts, particularly looking at systems and subsystems within an organization and focusing on how those interact to produce the whole. This does then allow for a degree of flexibility, because again the systems and subsystems which comprise the whole is an important unit of analysis, but the overall impact is what we're looking for. So the constituent parts will then create a larger whole, and that's really the focus of systems approach. So we're not examining subsystems and individual constituent parts in order to study them in isolation, but rather as an analytical unit to understand how the whole functions. And lastly, our fourth approach to management is the contingency approach, and this really does suggest what it is in the name. It's an approach which recognizes or says that it recognizes that there is no necessarily singular best way to manage, but rather the optimal approach for management depends on the given situation, the environmental factors, and the organizational context. So really the best way to manage in a situation and a given situation depends on a range of situational variables. So if one approach yields dividends in a particular situation, if you change some of those situational variables, then the approach needed may also change.